You're listening to a speech therapy PD podcast. Earn 0.1 ASHA CEUs for this episode by completing the accompanying course online at speechtherapypd.com.
Hey everybody, happy and welcome new season of First Bite. I'm your host, Michelle Dawson, and y'all, we have quite the lineup planned for this season. In all honesty, I truthfully don't know if we're on season 7 or on season 8. I just know we've been at it for a minute and we are going to continue to choose joy. So that's where we're at. But this season, which has already been recorded all the way through to July pretty much, and we will keep plucking away. I've got so many more amazing guests that are lined up to be recorded. But this season, we're going to continue to focus on expediting research to practice, on elevating lived experiences, on interprofessional practice, and going on this nerdy adventure that we started all those years ago. So I am in awe. We have guests like Courtney Turner coming on for World Hearing Day to talk about, that's in March, to talk about hearing in the public schools and what an educational audiologist does. In PFD and ARFID Awareness Month in May, I know we've got Meg Ciamone and Helen Cohen coming on to talk about their new project, the Daisy Project. Y'all, we've got so many amazing guests that I am incredibly humbled and honored and excited to host. So to kick us off for the new season, we have Miss Tracy Camille Johnson, who I met last February at Feeding Matters in Phoenix, Arizona. There's still time to sign up their conference. Their conference this year is virtual. It's at the end of February. Please come, y'all. They book the most amazing speakers. So it's incredibly worth it. So come on, sign up for that one, and I will see you virtually the end of February for that conference. But Tracy's coming on specifically to talk about lived experiences and how we can support our BIPOC caregivers in their child's feeding journey, and to kind of break down what systemic barriers we may not know exist if you are come from an upper middle class white family. There's things that happen in our world, that are happening in our world, that we don't know about. So we have to ask the hard questions, sit in the uncomfortable, and grow in our compassion so that we can ally and advocate for those that we serve. Because at the end of the day, we've all been called to be healers. And how awe-inspiring is our life's mission and our work to walk alongside these caregivers and these tiny humans and help them on their journeys. That's what this is about. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Tracy really is, y'all, she gives good hugs. And you know I like a good hug. But she radiates joy, kindness, and advocacy. So you're in for a treat. If you want to learn more from Tracy after this podcast episode, she was part of the lactation seminar that we hosted this past weekend, and that will be available, to my knowledge, later this week. Closer to Valentine's Day 2026. And you'll be able to take a peek. That was a 5-hour seminar that we hosted, and she closed out the seminar. So if after this podcast you want to learn more, take a peek there. And if you want to work with Tracy, to my knowledge, she practices through her private practice over near Austin. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you for going on this nerd venture with us, and enjoy the episode. Bye. All right, folks, we're back, which has apparently become a joke that I say that at the beginning of every episode, but old habits and all that jazz. But today's guest, I actually met almost 1 year ago now, because I met her in Phoenix, Arizona at the Feeding Matters conference when she was presenting. And I was way up in the nosebleed section because Tracy packed a room. And also, I don't do heights, and the seats were a little uncomfortable. But I was like, you know how when you go to an auditorium sitting and then you're like looking down, and I'm like, don't be the person that wipes out Michelle, because I'm already socially awkward enough as it is. But I digress. But afterwards, I came up and I asked Tracy if she could come on the podcast. And, all good things take a minute, but she's bloody brilliant. Tracy Camille Johnson is a speech pathologist, a pediatric feeding specialist, and a certified lactation counselor. She's originally from Chicago, and she now calls Austin, Texas home. But I found out that she is a Syracuse University grad, which is where Mindy, who does the editing, is in grad school for. So yay, love the circle. She's founder and CEO of Buttercup Therapy Services, which services the greater Austin region across the lifespan for feeding, swallowing, and communication skills since 2022. And y'all, she has volunteered all over. She's on the 2025 ASHA Convention for Equity, Inclusion, and Cultural Linguistic Diversity. She's a topic committee member. She is, again, for the incoming year. She volunteers with Embosla Cares and Embosla Gap, and Love and Rage Productions, which I don't know what that is, but I love those two things and they go connected. So fill in the gaps, ma'am. Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. I feel like it's just amazing people like you, allies who listen, and then magic just keeps happening. I'm so grateful for you. Love and Rage Productions. It's a play on words because the acronym is LARP. Right. And I don't know if you know about live action role playing, but it's an inside joke. We have some friends with a nickname Love, and I have this nickname Rage. And it's actually musicians and street performers. And so it's a local social nonprofit in which we go and tour, really highlighting even within street communities and street bands, the marginalized communities really accessing it. It being very much rooted in Black and Brown culture when you think of Mardi Gras or Carnival. And so really just providing that space for all. I, in my 20s, was a traveling touring musician on French horn. So this is how I still give back in my 30s, older now.
Honey, once you hit your 40s, that's where the real rate is.
All ages, because I do believe music is a universal language. So it still ties into, its expression. And I think it's one of a very valid, all artistic forms of expression. And as a speech language pathologist, really affirming any form, right? What can we do to facilitate? And we know also with studies, there's interventions around the connection of language and music. And so I see that, I use that, and I practice it myself still.
Do you know Corinne Zoom's with Gestalt Get Together, the podcast?
No.
Oh, my Lanta. You too. I am totally connecting y'all because she is a huge proponent of integrating music for early language acquisition with our echolalic GLP processors. And also same ideology about love and support for all marginalized communities and peanut butter jelly. Yes.
Yes.
So, yes. I didn't know you played the French horn. My husband plays the guitar, and my youngest plays the piano, and our oldest starts guitar now, actually. I think, folks, I recorded in the past. So he starts in January, and I'm really excited to see we have had so much OT for this kid. So to see this play out in guitar lessons, huzzah.
It's so beautiful. And I'm jealous of string instruments. That's actually how I got on the French horn. I really wanted to be in the orchestra, but I grew up in a band program. So that was as close as I got to them play one time. But yeah.
Well, please notice I acknowledged I played nothing in that little litany. So I appreciate it. But
the audience though too.
I can clap. But talk to us about, how did you become a speech therapist, and then focusing in on advocacy and PFD, because this is growth. Yeah.
Right. And I feel just very fortunate, like knowledge is power, right? And being in the know of the fields and the specialty. But admittedly, I feel like late. My family was always about education. It was not a question, you go to college, right? But it was like, that was just the given growing up. With the, you can do whatever you want. But I remember like being 18, I didn't have declare my major like until the very last moment, right? Going into junior year. And I actually first thought I was going to like major in math until I found out that like I wasn't even taking like prerequisite classes yet. Like I thought it was like high level math, whatever, algebra 500, I don't know. But it was like, yeah, no, this doesn't count towards like a prerequisite in mathematicianing. And so like, I was like, oh, but I randomly, I also grew up, honestly, with a lot of stigma in the education field around my writing until I got to Northwestern in undergrad. And like I'm there, like obviously I had to write a lot of essays and everything and was really successful in my writing. But in grade school, I had a different message given to me that really stuck until Northwestern and doing intensive writing programs. But I was avoiding taking like English classes. And in that regard, I've got a linguistic class that did count for, just general ed prereqs. And I loved it. It was taught by a person from South Africa, and it was really about articulation. So there was this science and math behind it, but then the art, like, of language, especially when you go into other realms of linguistics like morphology and semantics. But the articulation got me from the beginning. And I would become still actually, not necessarily declared anything, but, I'm going and doing now my linguistics requirements, figuring that out. And my mother, who was a special education teacher, now retired, was like, well, what do you do with a linguistics degree? Right? Like, she's like, what's the functionality?
That's the hard ones. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't know, become an expert witness over cases of the Oxford comma, how fun. But she's like, well, what's your job? Like, what are you going to do? So then I did some research, mom's asking real questions. That's how I found speech language pathology. And to me, it seems like a dramatic irony because it really was always in the background of like, how did I not kind of know about that field? And my mom being special ed, a teacher, though I was conditioned not to become a teacher, right? I think I could recognize the undervalue, the underemployment. My mom had a standalone, self-contained classroom. And if you don't know about special education, she saved a district millions of dollars in outplacement with behavior disordered kids, right? That really should have been in their own programming and outsourced. But really having a program in which to rehabilitate and get them back into the school in the classroom. But right, like that's a lot of work and a lot of struggle and being a single mom was like, well, I love kids and I love, supporting, special ed, but the education system I knew from a very young age seemed really flawed. So, right, can't be a teacher. What do you do with wanting to work with kids, loving the math, science, all of this stuff, but then linguistics, especially. I found speech language pathology. And then on top of it, I was just like very fortunate in a way that I ended up so I finally declared, right? Like, it's like, I gotta declare something, as far as Northwestern goes. And I declare, I switch into the School of Communications for the communication sciences disorders. Maybe at one point I thought I'd double major, but linguistics became a minor. I mean, in our program too, right, it really was speech language pathology, audiology, or special ed. So we still had some courses in that regard. Admittedly, I didn't have the best like college counselor, and somehow I probably was like avoiding anything with writing a little bit still, and like didn't take the clinical observation course I was supposed to in undergrad, and actually signed up for an infant feeding management course, and they didn't catch it until it was like too late, and they were like put into me that I was going to fail this graduate level course, and like, oh my God, we like so messed up, and like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, they like really screwed that up. Like,
right. Well, I aced the class. It was amazing. I loved it. It was just so applicable and functional to me that I was like, oh my gosh, speech language pathology and the function of the throat. And we need to go early intervention, which is feeding and birth and infant and development, right? Like I had this professor that it just all made sense. When I think even, for a bit, I still struggled with anything therapy, right? Did I really want to be in this therapeutic realm? But admittedly, I was born a millennial from the Midwest, who to me, any kind of therapy, talk therapy, it was like something's wrong with you and you go get fixed, right? So I think of it some stigma and misconceptions around that, though, that I was like, well, I don't really believe that people are wrong or are broken or, need to come and get fixed and I need to put them in a box. But really with this feeding class, and then later, actually, even in grad school, finding out more about relationship-based interventions, things that just did make sense, right? I, as a service provider, helping, being of support, rather than, right, this is what we have to do. We have to make you fit into something. How can I help you? What tools can I give to you to make you thrive and live, right? So, very early on, right? And as far as an undergraduate, junior, being even aware of swallowing and feeding as a scope of practice of SLP. Like I knew from the bat. I could talk about that just forever.
Of wearing faculty hat, all I can imagine is like, oh my God, the stress on but like, that's so cool. God, how did you go? Yes.
Right.
Okay. So you get out and you do all of these things, and then I meet you and you're talking about social determinants of health and barriers to access for our marginalized community members. But from you opened with talking about how you are a member of the BIPOC community, and you framed it and owned it for an audience. And what I love about Feeding Matters is that it's interprofessional. So a lot of colleagues don't know the statistical numbers of our profession, right? And it was empowering. So can you take us kind of from there?
Yeah. And I guess I recently realized or was like trying to think, again, as I found this profession, I never questioned necessarily the demographics of it. And I was just realizing like now I talk to you, I tell you what I do. I say, my profession is 92% white women, right? I always put it in this context, right? You think I've got it hard, or you think I'm working or I'm struggling. Well, then on top of it, especially I think as people kind of highlight the impacts on Black women in the workforce and what their colleagues and the makeup and the demographics are, right? Like in 2025, quarter away in the 21st century, this is what our profession is made up of. And honestly, I'm very proud to have gotten here and be licensed, right? But I wasn't part of my search when I was entering. But then really the experiences I would have, and especially like coming of age, in my 20s. So I would graduate Northwestern and I feel like I was naive. It was 2012. We had the 2008 like crash while I was in undergrad. And I was like, well, my family taught me you get a bachelor's degree. Now I'm ready to go work. There was nothing to do with a bachelor's degree or a living wage to get with my bachelor's degree other than becoming a nanny. And all of these, like I took a literal infant feeding management class, right? And child development. I even did sign language. So I marketed myself, and I am very grateful for, there's a lot of Karens in my life that actually I love Karens. Okay. Because I have aunts on both sides named Karen. And then actually one of my first nanny families was a Karen, who, a very interesting story. They had, her sister be the surrogate to their baby, right? Like this was a baby that they wanted and would love. And they entrusted me with this 6-week newborn, and they listened to me. And I think, Karen, Whitkin, a lot, because also she was a foodie. So, I was there introducing foods to her baby, and just that development, like she took my lead with these courses that, she hired me off of. And, I witnessed though, like my services and who I was able to service, and then also the disparities of just even knowing, what you should look for in a nanny, but it really sustained me before I wanted to be a better resource to my families, to these people that entrusted me, these babies. I was giving them what I knew, but I knew also that if I went and got a speech language pathology degree, became a feeding specialist, like I'd have even more access and resources, and really being able to share that even wider net than, one-on-one family or even a nanny share. So I did take a 6-year break before I went back to grad school at Syracuse. And then in 2018, I guess now after COVID, it seems like it was not that long ago, but we're talking about now 7-8 years ago. I was going through grad school in our 92% white women first. So really, I think it was in this time that I really became aware of who we were educating in our field and the lack of necessarily awareness and education around cultural diversity. And I had racist experiences in my grad program, and the program had to step in, and that's where it's like, I realized, it was also, it's rural or central New York state. It's not, it's very much a college town. In my studies, I would find out, Syracuse has one of the highest child poverty ratings at 50% in the nation.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I think it was also listed as like one of the worst places for Black people to live. It's very much a college town, right? A uni town. There's a SUNYs. There's all these hospitals. But I think it was also telling a person in my program was like, I live 30 minutes outside this city because it's too bustling. And I'm like, I'm from Chicago. This is like, is this even a town? I also actually am technically from a village, right? So I was like, is this like, what is bustling? But like, okay, right. Also like getting to know other people's, but yeah, sure. You want to live in the countryside. And I love to visit and like camp, and I love the outdoors or like vacation anywhere. I promise, like I will vacation anywhere, but I do love living in a city with access. So like, I kind of didn't understand that. I was having these experiences. I was one of 2 light-skinned Black women in my program, which I think I just also acknowledge not just racism in our society, but colorism, and the privileges that I get, right? Like I maybe it was also, I'm sorry, I guess I'm processing this too. So in my 20s, I was a punk rock street musician. I was like with the anarchists, like taken to the streets saying like, let's reclaim these public spaces. And also other people. I remember a trans woman getting on stage at a festival in Harvard Square in Boston being like, how is this free, accessible, and inclusive? Like, where are all the Black people? Right. So like I was hyper aware and hyper vigilant of being the token one. Because I was raised in a white family. My mom is white, and her siblings raised me. So like, as I keep aging and seeing less of my peers look like me, right? The higher education I get, like, I was like, how, like, yeah. And then they don't know that it's not appropriate to watch blackface in, 2018. Like, I'm like surprised, like, what? This is modern day to me. And that really did shape like this awareness around these inequalities of our field and profession.
There's so many things that you just said that are incredibly traumatizing. And I'm just trying to play catch up. And I know my face, I don't have a poker face. Like everything.
Which I appreciate, right? Like that's how we have this like live feedback. It's like, oh yeah, like Tracy, you're talking about stuff. And it is, it's very traumatizing. And actually I do have complex PTSD, not just from that, but obviously that would trigger a lot. But I guess I use that awareness, as I service my clients, right? And I rest and relaxation first. I've learned this through my life. Nothing is as serious as taking care of yourself and making sure your body is not chronically stressed and sending out emergency response signals. And that's through developmental trauma that I had. So like, I'm also just very aware of ACE scores, right? And I think also though my mom and her siblings, these Polish American immigrants who really combated a very high ACE score for me with like love and acceptance and the ability to, again, knowledge is power, right? It's the education is the greatest weapon you can use to change the world, said Nelson Mandela. And I believe that. And I thank my family so much for the love they shared. Even medical trauma, I was born with a GI issue. So really, I got also like, I learned through my practice and I'm able to advocate as much as you see me advocate for others. I got to learn to do it for myself. And that's where I want to share that, right? Like, thank goodness I found providers that listen to me, that want to help me, right? And that's what I want to provide to my families and clients as well, right? To really own and tell themselves they deserve proper culturally competent care, right? Humility,
Yes.
and to be listened to, as themselves, because I know that for myself too, but I had to learn that. And I feel like we have to learn that the hard way. And that's unfair too. So like, how can I not, I don't believe in kids struggling to learn, right? Or anybody. Let me share that. Like I did that for you, So like, there is no gatekeeping here. Let's just heal and get help. That's, I think, a big part of why I identify as BIPOC. I want to all say those statements as facts, right? Like there is inequality in our systems, in America, in capitalism, and it is tied to race. And so.
And it's my job as being part of that 92% to say, please listen. Okay, to go back to some of the things that you said, ACE is, for folks, if you're not familiar with the term ACE, ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Event. And what we know is that the higher your ACEs are, the more difficult life essentially is. And that's, to summarize in one sentence, like so much research and literature, right? But today, because we're recording Friday the 12th, I almost wrote it down as Friday the 13th, Friday the 12th. there was a news article in NPR this morning that Head Start is when they go to submit for grant writing, because Head Start has, grants, the list of words that they're not allowed to include in their grants, Indigenous, Black, people of color, person-centered care. They're not even allowed to include the word woman or women in their grant writing. But think about who Head Start serves. Head Start typically is the preschool that serves those that need it the most, right? And they tend to come from lower socioeconomic status homes, and you have to score so high in order to get into Head Start. And unfortunately, some of those high scoring points are ACEs. Being raised in a single family home, having a disability. Oh, disability was one of the words that they can't put on their grant.
Right.
And I'm like,
it doesn't make any sense.
I'm like, you want an upper middle class white crowd, and y'all, that's not what this is for. Right. But also, shout out and praise report to New Mexico for making all day care free.
Yes, actually.
Yes. So
I'm a socialist commie when you come down to it, because that's what I believe.
Yes, but this is what we should be doing.
Yes.
And so I sit here, and what struck me in your talk is that you go through your lived experiences to get into the profession, and then the lived experiences of the children that find their way to you. And it layered on to what I have heard from colleagues, what I have witnessed, as well as being a service provider for children, right? And folks, we have to be aware that under the current administration, and I don't know how to not be an SLP in the 21st century under this administration without also being an advocate. I can't part and parcel this, but our SNAP benefits are at risk. I mean, this fall they were cut, then they came back, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to be there in perpetuity.
Right.
But if we look at the individuals that are utilizing those services, and then add in disability, and they're there probably because of ACEs, but then let's layer that onto children that have pediatric feeding disorder. If you only have so many safe foods, and now you're worried about a scarcity issue or being able to afford them, this compounds what it is that we are called in to help and support. So feedback on that long tangent, ma'am. Where are we going from here?
Well, again, I think it's definitely people like you that really do support the mission and allyship that allows for the phrase to really be heard too. Listen to Black women, because I think when the adversity and marginalization of Black women, they will tell you that, of course, the special needs and disability community is not all right. The LGBTQIA2S plus is not all right, right? They're not just going to come for us, right? You've been unaware of the discrepancy of this population, but it really is going to affect everyone, right? If you're not a white man, a wealthy white man, the systems are not made for you to survive, let alone thrive, right? So I think that's where we have to take the lead from Black women. Or just listen, make sure they're at the table, make sure that conversation, right? If you want to know what's the right thing to do, make sure you have those perspectives around what the right thing to do. What does that mom really need, right? And I guess that actually goes into, I'm a really big proponent on the awareness of what it takes for someone to accept help, to get help. It's not as simple as, right, well, they're just not doing what they need to. And, right, this mom is struggling. Is it really on her that she couldn't get the therapist office on the line to schedule that appointment in 6 months and know what her life and predict the future is going to be? Or like, is that not the job of a Medicaid service coordinator to really be on it? But right, we all make mistakes, but you have to acknowledge how much then specifically Black women and then one with children with special needs are then, again, like you said, it just compiles. And so it's not as easy to think that they're just not doing what they're supposed to. I really wish people were aware of the simplest barriers of, like, you don't have a voicemail that they can leave a message at 12 o'clock at the middle of the night when they're actually able to call you. Or, you don't have an alternate realm, right? Even the internet, we really think of, emailing and the internet as just like this accessible thing, but it costs money. You need a cell phone at the very least, right? Or even access to the public library, right? I live I go service a town that doesn't have a public library. And I found this out 4 years ago and I was like, is that even, like, are you even a town then? I didn't know what the rules were even. Like, I thought like you literally need a library to be a city and town, right? They don't have a library. They had a volunteer one and the building had to be shut down, right? And they're building and they're getting it approved. But this whole town doesn't have access to a library. And the town over is like, this is rural Texas. Like, that's far, And so it's just like this access to information that honestly, I realize like how much I take public things for granted. And again, so even if it's public, right, that doesn't necessarily mean it's inclusive. If it's free, doesn't mean it's actually accessible, right? If people don't know about it and they don't have the actual means to access it, right? Like, so even if, SNAP worked great, is everyone really even getting into the program and or overcoming the stigma around being on welfare, quote unquote? So I just feel like there's so much where the action is like, there's every part that we need to be ready for. Cause as you said, right, SNAP might have came back, but it's still at risk. But then to me, right, are we still making sure everyone really does have access, even as it's operating too? And so again, to me, it's really actually letting the people that you want to help, telling you what they need. But that takes also a lot of awareness and knowledge. So are you educating them about what they could ask for help?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I know, like I can say everything about as like help, right? Like, but like people don't even like. I truly believe in the premise it takes a village, and yet that just goes at odds with the way we operate as a society, right?
Yes.
Like, I need to go, like, I don't want to be the expert in everything. I want my village and community to, like, I go to my butcher, I go to my, like, I don't know, like, like the doctor, the nurse, the teacher, the educator, right? The sanitation workers, right? I do believe, like, as a society, the best run society and community is just everyone's leaning into their skill and the way they want to contribute. But yet that would mean that we don't stigmatize, asking for help, or it's not a sign of weakness, or we don't have these tropes of strong Black women, especially, but independent women, right? How do we do that and ask for help, right? A lot of conflicting imagery.
Yes, but I'm thinking about all of the cases that are like, there's like standout cases in my head and in my heart that I'm like, I remember this pivotal moment. I remember the moment my eyes opened here, right?
Yes.
So folks, if you identify as a upper middle class white woman from a pretty nuclear family like myself, I mean, yes, did I have ACEs myself? Yes. My parents divorced. Fun fact, my stepdad was my dad's boss. At one point in time, all four of my parents worked at the same military base, and that was awkward as hell. But like, we all made it through with more or less varying levels of tea, but life, right?
Yes.
But I understand the older I get, the more privilege that I have had, right? And these are not concepts that I don't think I would. I know I would not have realized how much privilege I had it not been for Dr. Norman and Dr. Burns from Francis Marion University mentoring the daylights out of me. I wouldn't have seen it. But how blessed are my stars that I have had them and continue to have them, right? So through the lens, if I'm thinking about one particular case, and I was working in Columbia, South Carolina, and I was in the city. So pediatric feeding, the community kind of knew me for it. So I would get calls and kind of sent out to like obscure places. I could go 45 minutes in all directions. We would go from inner city to rural very quickly because how South Carolina lays out. Right. I was trying to set up an eval. Tracy, I never even got to meet with this family. I called and called and called, didn't have a voicemail. The phone was off. And in my mind, I'm like, they must be so irresponsible. Like, how come they can't afford to have their phone on? Right. That's my, listen to the prejudice.
No, see, you really have to learn this. Yeah.
Yes. Check one, they simply didn't have enough money for a phone. And if you have to choose between having power in your home or a phone becomes a luxury. Number two, I finally get a hold of them and I say, okay, so they've called me in to see your 4-year-old because I did up to 5 or 6 in early intervention because it was in home. And it was a 4-year-old. And I was like, so, I don't bring food with me. You'll have to have the foods there. And she goes, oh, that's not how the last therapist did it. She brought her food because we don't have any foods here. Okay. Concept number 2. What do you mean you don't have any foods there? And she goes, well, the kids eat breakfast at school and lunch at school. And then I'll hit the dollar menu up on the way home. And, whatever we get from the card, i.e. their benefits, that's what we have at the house, but we don't always have that. Okay. So, wow.
Yeah.
There's so much here. But then if we take it all the way back to Maslow's scale of hierarchical need, we learned this scale, that pyramid, a lifetime ago, probably in some general introduction to psychology for the family, right? That first step is making sure that you have a stable, warm, dry home or heated home in order to live. And the part at the very tip top is where you can have how do you say this word? Actualization. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah. Actualization.
Yes. Where you can want to better yourself, where you can want to take a class, where you can afford college, where you can read for the joy of reading. And that's the concept of learning. That very tip top is the concept of, I have the luxury to learn a new concept. But if we're all the way down here, those houses are not built on bedrock. They're built on sand. They will shift. They will crumble and they will fall. And they're not in a safe place. And this is what kills me is I was more upset about not being able to fit this kid into my schedule at a time that worked and making sure that they had food. It took me a day to process. And then the next day I was like, oh my God, we got to get services in. We got to get help. And so my entire approach to therapy was not they need therapy. It was we have to get them in and helped out with services. So I reached back out to in South Carolina, they don't have service coordinators per se. It's more like an early interventionist. Same role, different title, right? And so the EI ended up working to get them supports. But when the process of getting support and secure housing and all of that moved them out of my area altogether. And I didn't but this, all of that happened and I didn't even get to see the child, but that's a reality for some of these kids.
Right. And especially then, like you said, the moving too, right? And then I guess I recognize how much, now that I work for myself, has been the most consistent access to healthcare for my adult life, right? Because in America, your health insurance is tied to your employment and I would bounce around, right? I would enter the marketplace sometimes. I was on Medicaid at one point as a part-time nanny, or actually there was a year I got a real job but it was part-time for a nonprofit where, their bread and butter is volunteering. So, was I really was it a real job? I was poor, working a real job and not nannying and getting actually a living wage off of 3 days of work. Right. So this is also where I'm learning this, I'm becoming aware. And I think, for me, I am very grateful. Again, my mom, my biological mom is a white woman. And so I had those privileges, right? All this adversity I went through, again, through colorism in America. I also started to recognize the privilege that I had. I had this access to information. I had these people that were a generational wealth, and then I also then had this dichotomy image of the Black side of my family, though, too, which it's really interesting to me. My grandma's on the Polish American side, she had 9 children, and my Black grandma had 6, and 4 of them have the same name. So, right, I have an Aunt Karen, an Uncle Lawrence, and Uncle Michael on both sides, right? It's just to me, it's someone needs to do a sociological study, but I'm growing up and witnessing also just what is the difference between these people other than their skin color. And then because my grandma Lucille, my mom's mom, was so into education, it was just a staple in our household and our family. And so I'm an only child, but my mom's one of 9. And she's actually also the guardian of my aunt who has Down syndrome. And my aunt with Down syndrome is the second to last out of the 9. But my grandma felt called because she had gone into education and reading and was doing all of these programming to then have this special needs a child with Down syndrome. And I mean, my aunt has a college degree. And so it's just all these examples of really what women could do, there really wasn't any constraints, and there was a privilege to having these examples and these incredible people that made businesses, made institutions. My grandma was the founding president of the National Congress of Down Syndrome in the 70s.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she was. She was pretty epic, and I loved her. She's incredible. And really, it was that example, even through all that I was going to, my grandma loved me, and that love and that model, and really anything. I guess I give my family credit because they are second generation Polish Americans. So I feel they get the other, a little bit. And so there is at least that understanding, I think, more than just your typical, I don't know, white family. But, the Midwest, Chicago, but Chicago is the sister city to Warsaw. So there is a huge Polish population there. But all of this just really helped me then recognize the adversity I was facing, but then thankfully turn to the privileges of having a white family, having the access to education. And really, if something did go wrong, right, there was a safety net for me always, which a lot of people don't have. And then to have that concept of, I think I heard something about, if you have $1,000 in savings, you're better than 50% of Americans as far as ready for any kind of emergency, right?
Yes.
And that's a lot of people that cannot handle the unknown, right? And the simple things of what could happen.
Yes. How many times have I been there? Honestly, when you don't have $1,000, I remember being in college and going through the drive-thru and not having money for the dollar menu myself. Remember that, because when I was out, it was parents helped in the event of an emergency. And trust me, they did and they have. But like, it's just, again, but what a privilege that is that my parents could help in those moments. And I am aware of that.
Right.
So, folks, what does that look like for us as clinical providers? Like, if we tie this back to sharing all these lived experiences, right? And then we didn't even go down the rabbit hole of, I am, full disclosure, a domestic abuse survivor. From my ex-husband, who I was with in college, and some of my faculty knew about it. And, you know, I got out and I met my husband going through the divorce, and after sowing the appropriate oats, because girls got to do them things every once in a while. But I'll behave. Now I'm mildly embarrassed. Did you see my anxiety kick in? It was like all of the emotions. But
yes,
those, if we look at the homes that we go into, I have been in the homes where the caregiver has disclosed to me that the child's trauma was because dad threw mom down a flight of stairs when she was 7 months pregnant, and she had not disclosed that to the pediatrician because she didn't feel safe because the pediatrician was a man and I am female and I'm in their home, which I get, right? Like, that valid. We have the opportunity to create trust.
Mm-hmm.
But as service providers, as the person that's meeting them in the homes or in the clinic or wherever you work with them, bedside, if you're in the NICU, we get them at very intimate and vulnerable moments. And we have to do our due diligence of looking at ourselves to address our potential biases. And I don't mean bias, folks. Y'all, it's insidious. You'll think of the big ones, right? Like, we think of race, we think of different languages, right? We think of different faiths. There's bias within that framework, but those little thoughts that, like I gave examples of earlier, why couldn't they afford this? You were talking about they didn't have a voicemail. We have to put those biases at the proverbial figurative door, because they're here now, and it is our job to meet them here and then to lift them up and look at the community resources. Look at the community resources, because we are claiming that they will exist. We're manifesting that these community resources will always be there and that they will continue to grow because of the goodness of humanity that I still believe in, regardless of everything that's happened in the last year and a half. But that's what we have to look for. So what are your favorite community resources to direct people to?
In Basla, the National Black Association of Speech, Language, and Hearing. They have a convention in which talk about being a place to be able to listen to Black women, but also so Black. But really it was also because, right, as far as representation matters, doing the right, as I say, like, ask people how they want to be helped. I think in Basla's mission about the diversity of the Black profession in speech, language, and hearing, but also then the communities we serve, right? They give the examples, and it's also a lot of them in the profession that allowed me to stay in the profession after going through and seeing this and being like, you know, every day or every year, you know, dealing with this 92% white women supervisors that didn't necessarily have the cultural competency for me as a non-traditional student too, right? I was about to hit 30 when I was in grad school, and then doing my CF, right? It's not the same. It wasn't the same for me, but we have a lot of rubber stamps, and that's how we get to 92% white women, I think, in my opinion. So I think in Basla is just, I am so grateful for them and their membership, who really are the ones who showed me what what could be a reality for myself, right? A private practice and feeding and swallowing as well, right? Being able to really fill my cup through that organization to get through this daily grind of the society and culture and the systems that we really are fighting for, the majority of the time, to be seen, to be heard. So yeah, in Basla all the way.
Yes. Folks, I'll be honest. The first time I heard about Basla was at maybe my first ASHA convention. And Dr. Norman was working the booth. And she caught me. Like, I was just, you know how like when you go through the aisles at ASHA and you're just, it's so visually overwhelming. There's so many things. There's so many colors and so many smells. I'm in like sensory overload.
Yeah, actually, you're right.
Yeah. And I'm walking by and I have no idea what I'm looking at by this stage of the game. And I'm like, it's another alphabet soup. Okay, cool. Just keep on walking. And Dr. Norman stopped me and she was like, you should think about joining a Basla. And I was like, I don't know what this is. She's like, it's the National Black Association. And I, who have no filter, I was like, but I'm not Black.
I've had that experience too. Or I told someone that I was like, it's still the reaction. It makes sense. Like, yeah. Right.
I truly thought you had to be Black to be a member. And Dr. Norman looked at me. She was like, I know that. I was like, yes. And that's how I found out you don't have to be Black to be a member of Basla. You can be an ally. But the fact that this woman still loves me is very humbling. I'm a mess. But yes, but it was, I have so enjoyed going, and there is so much community, and the lectures are amazing there too.
And actually, before you saw me at Feeding Matters, I saw you at Basla the year before.
Yes. Was that the year the boys' school caught on fire? Was that in North Carolina, or were we at?
Yes.
Yes. I had to leave early because the ceiling of the boys' school caught on fire in the middle of the night, and I had to leave. Yes, and but I was so devastated because I had. Well, I was there for like one day, and like normally in Basla, y'all is like a several day event, but I was in and out. Everything was fine, and the school was fine. But I mean, obviously, mommy had to come home because fire. So like that was my life is not boring. Yes, but other community resources. If we look from the perspective of the caregivers, my favorite resource that I learned about was from Julia Ochoa, who was one of the co-chairs for pediatric feeding and swallowing for ASHA for 2025. I think Dr. Goza Memory was the other co-chair for 2025. So I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. But Julia was part of a panel discussion years ago, and she talked about this organization called findhelp.org. And you put a zip code in, and it will pull up resources you don't even know exist. Meal support, electricity support, propane. I'm thinking of propane because they just filled us up today, but like all sorts of different events, housing, for in cases of domestic abuse and violence, like things that you may not have known could be necessary because of the privilege that you have that you may not realize is a privilege. And that in and of itself, like when we think of bias can be hard for some people to wrap their mind around. But y'all, I feel like bias also just is another word for privilege. Like really truthfully, like that's what it is. You have been privileged to have less ACEs, or you have been privileged to maybe have had an ACE, but have been in a situation where it did not impact you as much as it could have impacted another because your foundation was on bedrock and not sand.
Yes.
And that's the difference for some between a big T, big trauma, and a little T, little trauma. But it's not for us to judge whose T is bigger, right? Like having trauma is trauma. And that's what.
Yeah. I just think, life is hard, right? Like it's a hard life. So everyone has, and I think I like never play that game, like who had it worse. Like a trauma is a trauma. And like, I think we all have like some example, or, it really isn't comparative, and especially as you said, because it affects people differently, right? Like it doesn't mean it wasn't a traumatic experience. It just means, right, how you're able to process and continue on with life. Can be very different. And I think that's all, to unpack biases, that's all it is just awareness. Like, I think that's the biggest part, right? Like, how aware are you of yourself? Because then you can separate, theory of mind from all these other individuals, right? They're not going to have the same experiences and privileges. And then you won't judge them for that, right? Because you're aware that they're just the unique individuals that they are. And we're all doing our best. I mean, I think that's a premise very much so, right? Like we're all definitely doing our best. Like, sometimes it doesn't go very well and it's still hard, but I think that's a core rule. Like no one's trying to be not good or do their best.
Unless they're Scrooged, in which case, may I recommend the, Spirited. Have you seen Spirited with Will Ferrell and the hot guy, Ryan, whatever?
Yes.
No, but you can be Scrooged, people, or you can choose to not be. That's the moral of the story. Also, Tracy, it's hysterical. I highly recommend you watch Scrooge. And then, because at the end, they're all like, good afternoon to you. And good afternoon is like saying, somebody to bugger off. Like now they're like, Mom, that guy cut you off driving. Good afternoon. I'm like,
that helps. That helps. No.
Yes. I had a thought right before my thought process went 14 different ways. Something to leave us thinking on as a call to action, right? But in talking about ACEs and talking about food scarcity and talking about we do no harm and we want to lift them up, some individuals that have SNAP benefits might have a dual diagnosis of celiac disease. And it caught in my mind because of your aunt, because 1 in 4 individuals that have Down syndrome will have celiac disease, right?
Right.
And currently, to my knowledge, SNAP benefits do not cover gluten-free options.
Oh, I guess I just thought it was the concept, though, that's so expensive. So, right, if your choice is to spend, a 10th of your SNAP benefits on one thing versus something that's going to last you longer and you can get more bulk of it.
Yes.
But yeah, it is. But, that's the hard choice of, the lack of awareness over the intersectionality of disabilities too.
Yes. Which begs the question, because we're manifesting SNAP is staying put.
Right.
How do we then turn around and advocate to get the correct nonprofits and powers that be? I'm thinking Feeding Matters and ASHA and the National, they have a terrible acronym, like the North American Association of Autoimmunologists and Allergists. Like it's
right.
Yeah. But like, how do we get all of these entities together to say, we need this menu redone, these options redone to be inclusive of those that have a medical diagnosis? The intersectionality. I love that word.
Yeah. And I think of the, to me, I use the dramatic irony, right? The being in the know of this storyline around that we have this MAHA going on, Make America Healthy Again, right? But yet it's with the Kennedy and just like this. Some of these scientists are saying like, it's kind of weird that we agree, but like in action, we don't, because the MAHA movement is talking about, they judge people like, you're using your SNAP benefits to buy candy and chips. That's why there's not salad bars accessible, right? Like they don't give credit to people living in food deserts. They literally judge, these people as being like, you just want to poison your kid with unhealthy food. And it's like, you're not recognizing the accessibility and this intersectionality. So I wish we could all get, and even at the Feeding Matters conference this year, I thought it was so relevant to find out how much doctors don't learn about nutrition. And to me, like, eating is humanity. Like, what do you mean we don't know how to feed ourselves? Like, our doctors and medical providers don't study the impacts of feeding, right? So the impact of like, well, what happens when a celiac person with Down syndrome is only accessible to eat all the carbs and wheat? Like,
yes.
We don't know, no one studies that, and no one thinks about the actionable item of having access to the proper diet and the individual diet of that person and the subsidy or the programming needed to do that. Like, we don't study that. We don't prioritize that in a thing, and we don't think about the solution, which to me seems pretty simple. Like, where we have a variety of accessible diets and intakes that are covered through a government program to support our most vulnerable populations of socioeconomic disability and anything else.
Yes. So when you run for an office, you have my vote.
No, actually, that's so funny you bring that up. We talk about that in Basla recently a lot too, right? Or just actually in the field of, our skill sets, even within speech pathology, even the 92% white women might have that imposter syndrome. But talking about even the research, you just said how we can't list a bunch of words. What better profession to get the semantic imagery workaround than a speech pathologist to figure out how to get that government money, right? Or really all of our skill sets. That means that, you could be a speech pathologist, or do you want to run for office? We have the history of the Department of Education. Like, that hasn't made sense to me in a while. I don't know.
Retirement plan.
Tracy for president.
Tracy for president.
Maybe bored.
Honey, thank you. Good Lord, this went by fast. This was a hour. Okay. So if somebody is listening and they have a question, or they just want you in their corner, how can they reach you?
On social medias at chattytraceface.slp. So Trace, TRACEFACE, chattytraceface.slp.
Beautiful.
Yeah, please hit me up. I love connecting. Right. I love talking, having conversations, because I think that is where that's why I love our profession. I think that's how we have these positive experiences and bond and relationship, and we all deserve that. So please connect. I'd love to chat.
And if somebody listening has a little bit of love money lying around, this is what my grandma called it, like the money left over at the end of the month. Or she'd call it mad money if she wanted to go blow it at an antique store. But where could they donate it to? What organization, what entity?
Because I definitely think, right, know globally, be in the know globally, but act locally. So I'm going to say Black Mamas ATX. Black Mamas is working with that education and access to Black mamas, right? Giving those resources to them. And right, locally, ATX, Austin, Texas.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, folks, please be an ally. Please make a safe space. Please.
See my Basla shirt. Sorry.
Yes.
Didn't really get shown off in the frame very well.
Yes. But please, if we're open to listening and learning from somebody who has walked a different walk, we can help heal so many more, and not only just help the little ones that we serve, but also their caregivers and our colleagues. I will close with, I had a mom get teary with me a couple of weeks ago. And she said, "You told me I could tell the doctor what I wanted." And I was like, yes, the doctors work for us. And she goes, "I did that not just for my son, but for myself. And my doctor did not put me back on Zoloft because her body doesn't do well with Zoloft. Her doctor changed her medicine at her request." And she started crying and she said it was the best she had felt in ages. And just that one conversation of, "No, Mama, these doctors work for you.
Yes.
They work for us. Like, this is, I work for you. If I am not the right therapist, let me go and God Almighty find the one that works for you." Right?
Same. Exactly.
It was beautiful because we had a relationship built in trust.
Yes.
We created this space where she could be honest and just, wow, she took it to heart. So y'all, let's check our biases and our privilege at the door, but use those biases and those privileges, your internet access, your phone, all of those things for the greater good so that we can help. So, Tracy, I will see you shortly in Atlanta because I do believe I'll be there. And folks, if you don't know, Atlanta, and Basel's in Atlanta this year. Go team.
April 9th. Yep.
Yes. And I am determined to go to the Coca-Cola factory. I have been to Atlanta 3 times and I haven't made it to the Coca. And I don't even drink soda, but I just want to go because I love the history. Yeah. It's creepy. That's my version of like, I don't do the murder shows, but like, man,
but
Coca-Cola and like Ringley Brothers, man, or Barnum. That's scary.
Circus. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Remember to visit speechtherapypd.com to earn 0.1 ASHA CEUs for this episode and to see our library of over 1,400 courses for all things SLP.